All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone,
Okay.
for coming to the last of the American leg for Thursday for ICMI 2021. We've been having a pretty good day so far, and we saved the best for last. Vernon, how are you doing? No, I'm just kidding. Don, Don's the best for last. So, how are you doing today, Don?
I'm just fine, thank you guys. Enjoying the conference. I'm not able to attend everything, but everything I can see, I'm really enjoying. You guys are doing a bang up job, so hats off to you and delighted to be here.
So, we're kind of waiting for a question. Douglas has posted something that's not really a question, and I'm almost tempted just not to read it because we would prefer to have questions, but I'll go ahead and read it to kind of start things off. I was pleased to hear your take on sex selective abortion. It mirrors my own thoughts that the whole idea of sex selective abortion is effectively impossible. An abortion is justified because the baby isn't a human. And if it isn't human, it can't have a sex. Or if it is human, it shouldn't be aborted.
Yes, that was kind of what I was getting at, that contradiction. And there are, if you'll expand on this a little bit, there are a remarkable number of contradictions on excuse me, I'm old, so when I talk, I cough, it seems. Uh, there are a remarkable number of contradictions on abortion. I know sometimes when a so-called pro-choice argument person, a pro-abortion rights person says that she wants to make the point emphatically, she'll describe it as the developing fetus as a unwanted bundle of biological material. And I mean, I don't believe that, but I've often wanted to ask one, let's test if you believe it. And if you've had kids, I would like to say to this woman, or your friends must have had kids, when they announced their pregnancy, did they say, we're having a wanted bundle of biological material? I would doubt it very much. I doubt they would even say, we're having what's going to be a baby. They would say, we're having a baby, because the pregnancy is part of the having, right? It's baby. So yeah, that's just the one that Douglas got onto as one of the more, I think, blatant contradictions in the whole thing. Of course, contradictions are no stranger to feminism, but it seems maybe abortion might even have the most. Hard to say.
Well, what I find interesting in this conversation is how the law treats it. Now, because abortion is allowed, sort of, it's not actually allowed, but no one ever really seems to stop it. It's, oh, well, it's not a life form. That's why we can go ahead and abort it. But if a gunman runs into McDonald's, tries to rob the place, and there's a pregnant woman, and the gun accidentally goes off, shoots the woman, and kills the baby, he's considered to have taken two lives. Well, we can't have it both ways. Either he has taken two lives, or he's taken the life of a woman and biological matter.
Yeah, that is very true. In fact, there's kind of a bit of an extreme case. It goes back quite a few years ago now. You guys might recall it. A pregnant wife by the name of Lacey Peterson was murdered by her husband. It was eventually found to be out in California. I forget what his first name was, but
Scott.
Scott, thank you. But what happened there, as I understand the law in California, um, if you kill a person, you can get up to life imprisonment, probably without parole, I would think. If there are special circumstances, you can get the uh, death penalty. Special circumstances including if you commit a first-degree murder while committing another crime, so a rape, a robbery, or if you kill a second life. Well, what happened and just by the way, California, extremely gynocentric state and extreme abortion laws. So what happened is when they concluded that when they charged the Scott Peterson with killing his wife, they also charged him with killing the baby. Now, his wife could have had an abortion at that stage as a matter of her fundamental right. But because he killed both her and the baby, the killing of the baby, the second, now suddenly a person, made him eligible for the death penalty for killing her. So that's the killing of the second human, the baby, made the planned killing of his wife eligible for the death penalty, and they gave him the death penalty. Very rare in cases of domestic violence, but that's how they rationalized it.
So before I let Vernon ask a question, I want to address Dean. We saw your question in Huga and we hit it, and we see your question now in Zoom. And it's basically about copywriting the Y chromosome and relating it to abortion. And we're choosing not to ask this question because it's too hypothetical of a question. And we can't even really know how copywriting the Y chromosome would have any practical effect in society. It's just a lot of guesswork, and it's kind of hard to answer that directly towards abortion. So that's why we're not going to ask that question. So I know that might sound mean or cruel of me, but we'd rather try to focus on reality, the reality of the situations we have now, rather than focusing on something that has no basis in reality. I don't think anyone could ever copyright the Y chromosome.
All right. So I watched your talk with Liz and Mike, and you brought up the idea of the lie of the half truth. Now, I guess the way you put it was the feminists would say that it is true that the woman's autonomy is real, but they ignore that of the unborn child. And so, would you say that gynocentrism is the one that prioritizes one over the other? Do you have more to say on that subject?
That's an interesting one. I'd have to say it's gynocentrism on steroids, or one might say on estrogen, perhaps. And the reason I say that is we've been a gynocentric society for a long, long, long time, but up until recently, that is during my lifetime, the last 50 years, I think Roe against Wade, the abortion case in the States was 72. Canada's abortion laws didn't get struck down until 89, I believe. So it's only been relatively recently that this has occurred. So I think it's based in part on gynocentrism, but gynocentrism that's completely out of balance, gone really to an extreme.
You there, Don?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was about it. So it is in part, but it's aggressive gynocentrism, extremism, gynocentrism, because in all the decades or centuries before this that we were gynocentric, this kind of thing did not happen. We did not have this kind of extreme state of affairs being seen as a fundamental right. That's very recent.
So I definitely welcome people to ask some questions here. This is a not such an easy topic to discuss because, as I was talking about earlier with Don, we get emotions on both sides of the issue, and no one really wants to come to the middle and discuss this logically. But I'm going to ask you a question, and I will preface this that I do believe abortion is wrong and should be outlawed. But for me, and I will be having an interview with Mike Buchanan on Saturday, and I actually do bring this up, that my concern with the abortion problem is that education is not in place yet to teach teenagers about sex properly. Everyone's all about abstinence, so teenagers go at it not knowing the full implication. But the other half of this is that that most people who end up getting an abortion usually live in some level of poverty. And so if they're going to try to raise the child, that child is going to be subject to that poverty, or more than likely will end up in the adoption foster care system. And studies have shown that those who grow up in the foster care system are more likely to become criminals, more likely to be in prostitution, more likely to go to prison, more likely to kill someone. So my question for you, Don, is that why is it that this issue, we're only concerned about the child being alive and not so concerned about what happens to that child as they grow up? They could very well grow up and go on a mass shooting and kill 10 people. And what is one life compared to the 10 people they killed? Why is it once they're born, we stop caring?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And I do hear that argument a fair amount from the pro-abortion rights side. So I'm glad you raised it, regardless of your own views. I'm going to take issue a little bit with a couple of the statements or of the premises. One is that it's just the poor, or that have, or even overwhelmingly the poor, that have abortions. There's still a number of very large welfare families around, and I think a lot of middle class and upper middle class girls and women have abortions too. I don't know the stats on that for sure, but that certainly strikes me as the case.
To be
So it
fair, I
would
did
be,
say generally.
yep,
I actually agree with you on that. It's
yeah,
across the spectrum.
yeah, fair enough. And I think it would be good facts for us to know. So I'm glad that you raised it. Number two, I'm going to disagree with the conclusion or the premise that, say, conservatives or pro-life types, pro-life anti-abortion types, stop caring once the kid is born. What happens? It's the same level of care, but it's very low. And what that level of care is, nobody has the right to kill you. Whether you're in the womb or once you're born, nobody has a right to kill you, but you're more or less on your own other than that. And so the level of care doesn't drop, it's just extremely low. Having said that, I, as some of you know, have historically been much more on the left. I've had to stand with conservatives because the left left all its values that were any good. So here I am. But I would be more inclined to be one that would kind of support social programs and to bring along the disadvantaged as best we can with enhanced education and all that. So that's not I agree, it can be a bit of a accusation against some pro-life types. It wouldn't be an accusation against me because I do kind of believe those things are worthwhile. And then I guess the final point is this: it does come back to I guess that point, is it better to be aborted than to be born into what might be a bad life? And that's a real, fundamental philosophical question. But I think it's one that society as a whole has to answer, and to answer it honestly, not as an excuse to give women radical abortion rights.
All right. So Douglas Wallace has a question. The slavery angle is new to me. I'm assuming he's talking about the interview you had.
Yes.
One of my area of concern in the global men's movement, often invisible to the MRM because it tends to be nationalist, is that of modern slavery. Feminists have broadened the push against modern slavery into all sorts of areas now. What do you think of the feasibility of introducing abortion into the debate on modern slavery?
I didn't realize that feminists had broadened the debate on modern slavery, other than they said that women were virtual slaves, or at least property. I did that in this interview. I made the analogy to slavery because it's one I heard a conservative politician mention it once 40 years ago, or no, be even less than that, maybe 35, on a radio phone-in show where he was being interviewed, and he didn't explain it at all. He just made the analogy, and it got me thinking about it, and I explored it, and as Douglas pointed out, he hadn't heard of it before. I don't think many have. I don't think many have thought of it, but I had thought of it, and once I heard about it and thought it through, and thought there was an interesting analogy there. Of all the persuasive reasons, perhaps to be more pro-life than pro abortion rights, I don't think that one's going to. A lot of people are going to find that highly persuasive. They'll probably just roll their eyes when they hear the analogy, because on the surface it seems so different. So if we ever got into, like, again, an open public or societal debate on this, I probably wouldn't bother to raise that one that much. But I think it does have some truth. So that's why I brought it up in this interview.
So, something that I find most surprising on both sides, the left and the right, is, of course, the right is a lot more conservative and believes in the old ways of doing things. And the left is more about the new age of doing things, my body, my choice. But in the case of boys that are born, both sides are actually quite adamant about circumcision. And it's like the right wants to save the child at all costs, but they will cause further injury by circumcising the child. And the left, of course, will do it because, hey, I think a penis looks better that way. So does it come to a surprise to you that circumcision seems to be separate from the abortion issue?
I mean, it seems to me it is, in that there's no loss of life. I know there have been, excuse me, a big push amongst MRAs to say, look, this is a mutilation. It's the poor little tiny baby has got no ability to make a choice. That sort of, unless it's something hugely compelling, that even parents ought not to be sort of messing with the body of their baby for something that isn't fairly crucial. I had a buddy whose son was born with kind of a club foot, but they got it when the kid was a baby, and they straightened it out, and was able to grow more or less normal. So yeah, that kind of decision by a parent on a baby makes sense, but other things perhaps not so much. So it seems to me the side that's saying we shouldn't mess with this are kind of making a more powerful case. There does seem to be a thing that some women do prefer the look of a circumcised penis, and that actually seems to be a factor. I recall on the old Seinfeld show that Elaine either preferred or would only go to bed with guys who were circumcised because she said, I need a penis that has a face, it has more personality. So making a joke of it, but kind of there's that thing there. I think though, for the most part, what parents thought was that it's unnecessary skin, the boy's going to have trouble cleaning it, it's going to get dirty, he might get infections. I think that was the thinking back in the day, as opposed to female sexual preference. So I don't think doing it was nationally based on something that's sexist, but given all the evidence that's come out on the other side, it seems like at the very least it's probably something that ought to be reconsidered. Not at the very least, there ought to be parental education, but perhaps even as the law of the land.
Well, just for clarification, the reason why circumcision was implemented in the United States was because of Dr. John Kellogg. He thought any form of sexuality was bad, and a lot of people used to listen to what he had to say on a variety of medical subjects, and he said that in order to stop children from masturbating, which would cause sickness, it was best to circumcise them.
So he actually thought then from that time that foreskin had something to do with male sexual pleasure.
Yep.
Wow. I learned something. Thank you.
All right. So Dean Hedges asks, is there a reasonable way to avoid forced fatherhood in an anti-abortion point of view?
There was, well, how they used to do it back in the day, as I was mentioning in my talk, that unmarried fathers had no responsibility for the child. They had no rights, but they had no responsibility. So that would be one way to go. One of the things that makes me hesitate about that is back in the day, there was very little single motherhood, and now there's a whole lot of single motherhood. So to give license to guys to kind of run free and not, sort of take any responsibility at all, I think is a real danger. So I think that's something, again, that requires a broad society-wide discussion, because it seems to me things are unsatisfactory the way they are now, but it's hard to come up with a solution that will be reasonable and not have pretty horrible consequences of its own. I would say though that things as they are can't stand, that guys we don't even have good effective means of birth control. We can't tell when a female partner is ovulating or not. There's all kinds of risk there. To have a minimum 18 years of unwanted responsibility, it seems to me, is unreasonable, when women don't even have to take 9 months, or if we became a more pro-life anti-abortion society, it would still be at most 9 months. It seems to me that imbalance has to be fixed somehow. And as I also mentioned in the talk, there's been quote, children of the marriage that fathers have to pay for, even though they're 26 years old and going for their PhD. So the imbalance is so great that something has to be done. Just what that something is, hard to know what would work best.
it's it's just so interesting to me that our society forgives women for not being up to the responsibility for motherhood, but demonizes men for the exact same thing. And I mean, if we get rid of abortion and make it illegal, we then are forcing women to become responsible for the children they have. But that still is going to give them a lot of power to keep men out of the picture. Because right now, women have the option of having the child and having the father in their life, having the child and not having the father in life, although they're still responsible, giving the child up for adoption, and in some cases they can like go to Utah and stay there for a while so they can give it up for adoption and not have the permission of the father, or they can just abort it. So if we cancel abortion, say you can't do that, they still have a lot of options that keeps the father out of the picture. And
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the downsides men face are multitudinous for sure. And I would think probably the best we can do is to try to get states' laws as uniform as we can, and have it at least as a general proposition that the male parent, his consent has to be involved unless there's really compelling reasons why not. And it seems to me that would go a long way towards making things at least a bit better. And but it does seem that like on any given issue, the disadvantages that men face, it's like not just one. It's like you solve one, and as you say, there's three or four others, Chris, that are there, and reason to believe they will become more intensified then. So it really is a multi-headed beast that we face. Maybe I'll throw out this one if I might, unless there's a question right there, because I didn't get to it in my talk. But it didn't really deal with abortion because I am more on the life side. But one of the things that's bothered me about feminism is many aspects of its hypocrisy. But part of that hypocrisy, it seems to me, is choice. And one of the ways that I'll back up. They seem to violate the concept of personhood, which was a big thing in the 70s. In the 80s, they said that men felt their society treated women like they weren't even persons and blah, 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 which isn't true, of course, but an element of truth, and then the rest was a lie. But the other place they're hypocritical on is equality when it comes to equal rights. Seems to me one of the things we could do is have for people who are more sympathetic towards abortion, is make it a decision of the conceiving couple. Because if one parent wants the child, how is that not enough to save a child's life? I just don't get that. Even if you said that either parent, but in this case it would be the mom, could walk away without further responsibility. At least the child lives and is being raised by a parent who wants the child. So that's the other hypocrisy that I think should be addressed. And it would, again, go some way towards solving, both reducing the number of abortions, plus giving women some amount of responsibility and giving men some degree of rights.
All right, so Dean Hedges asks, can I ask about the inversion? What reasonable compensation for the man who wanted to be father to the aborted fetus?
Yeah, that is that is quite a thing. Right now society, they just acknowledge no no interest of the man, no valid interest of the man in the baby. Um, when it's in the womb, for a while. Some of the extremeness uh, in the whole sex and reproduction thing is mind-boggling. For a while, there was a move to for women. This would have been in, I think, the 70s, maybe early 80s, to get women off birth control, because there are some downsides to birth control. The major one is a female over 35 who smokes is more susceptible to a stroke, I think. There are some other things that are less serious than that. So the push was make men responsible for birth control by having to wear condoms all the time. And so that'll free women from having any downside by the pill. The reason that went by the way is that condoms tended to interfere with women's sexual pleasure too much. So that got dropped. But it was actually, they're actually going for male responsibility for birth control, female rights with respect to pregnancy, female rights with respect to and by pregnancy I mean with respect to abortion. And if she could abort, if she didn't, as we know, she could give the kid up for adoption and not even let the guy know. Or if she wanted to keep the kid, she could make the guy pay. So like guys were like a bouncing ball that they either have, like they bounce between maximum responsibility and no rights, or yeah, their two options were tons of responsibility or no rights whatsoever. And there was like nothing in between. And there were several choices that females could make along the way of the whole process. And so this is one of the things that's focused me on abortion so much, other than the whole issue about the value of life itself, but that the contradictions and hypocrisies and the zigzagging back and forth to opposite positions by feminists, depending on what gives women the most power at any given point in the process, is mind-boggling. So all that to say, yeah, this is one of those, to get back to the question specifically, this is one of those many, many, many things. There are men who have been heartbroken for the rest of their lives. There was a guy I saw, it's just a guy on YouTube, but he drove his girlfriend to get the abortion, even though he was, kind of iffy on whether they should, but she was determined, and he didn't have rights. Although in fairness, he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure what they should do. He was a little doubtful they should get the abortion, but he wasn't prepared to fight. And he said every year around the time the kid would have been born, or I think it was or it might have been on the anniversary of the abortion, he gets depressed and weeps and thinks of how old the kid would be at that age. So men do have feelings about those things, as that question implies, but of course it's not acknowledged. We're just these heartless sex machines with no desire for responsibility, apparently. And that's how we're portrayed. So yeah, we're not going to get anything like that soon, like some sort of compensation for loss, like not a chance.
So it would be great if we could abolish abortion like right now. I kind of disagree with that notion, but for the most part, I mean, if there is no consequences to it, I'd like sign the paperwork right now. Boom, it's done. But of course, nothing like that ever really happens. It kind of has to happen in steps. And one thing I'd like to see, if this is going to happen in steps, that if women want an abortion, they have to pay for it themselves. And the idea that we as taxpayers, that we have to pay for someone's bad choices. And I also bring up I'm forgetting her name at the moment, but she was someone I used to talk to on YouTube all the time. And she told me about Canada and growing up that girls, like 13-year-old girls, like would brag about how often they would get an abortion. And of course, abortions are free in some places in Canada. So you can
Oh
just
yeah.
walk in, get it, walk out. And it's like, why should that be responsibility of everyone if you made the bad choice? So what do you think on the idea that as a stepping stone to eventually abolishing it, that women have to pay for it themselves?
Yeah, there's a few really interesting issues there. And just by the by, my province was one where um, women paying for abortions got struck down, paying for choice abortions. And what happened was, we have universal health care, but it's not for absolutely everything. It's for what they call insured services. It just means some services are covered and some aren't. So pretty much anything elective, well, it's not quite true, but some things that are elective aren't covered. And one was a choice abortion, and our courts struck that down. And so not only is there and that was, I think, at our Court of Appeal level. So not only is there a fundamental right to abortion, this makes me a bit crazy. There's a fundamental right that somebody else pay for it, which, as we know, is kind of a big thing with not even just feminists, but even relatively normal women. They seem to want somebody else to pay for their stuff, right? And whether it's, I mean, you get the same thing with childcare. We've got, huge demands for subsidized childcare. Well, the reason you need someone to raise your kids at, like during those critical years when they're young is because you're not there. You're out in the workplace earning money. How about taking some of that money to pay someone else to raise your kids? But no, 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 no. Someone else has to pay for us, or else we're oppressed and our fundamental rights um, are are denied. So at one level, I do like that idea very much. At another level, the thing I don't like about it is that it is poorer women who will not be able to afford an abortion, and that it bothers me that relatively well-off females could simply pay their way out of the responsibility. Now, that's again kind of my left-wing history, a bit of an awareness of class all the time, and that part does bother me. However, having said that, I do agree that you know we have to fork over tax dollars so a woman can have a free choice abortion. Doesn't sit well with me either. uh, if that were merely a step and we could see progress was coming like sort of fairly fast after that, then I'd probably be in favor of that. If it's just going to penalize poor females, I think I'd be less likely to support it myself.
Okay, well, that was a very honest answer, and I appreciate your candor. Like we said, a lot of people take extreme emotions to this, and that's one thing I appreciate about you is, you're trying to come at this from a logical standpoint, and these are hard questions to answer, and sometimes we simply don't know the answers.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Chris.
So that's going to do it for us today. I thank everyone for coming out and watching us today. I thank you for the questions we got. Again, this is a hard issue to talk about, but it is a necessary one that we need to talk about. Because this isn't just men's issues, this is children's issues.
Yes.
And abortion is basically the murder of life. And you might say that it's a necessary evil right now because other systems in place are not yet ready to handle making this bad. But sooner or later, we need to outlaw this. So, once again, I thank everyone. Don, thank you for coming out today and talking with us and answering questions. And I hope you have a good day. Actually, first, how can people find your stuff online?
I I don't really have stuff online. I always keep threatening myself that I will do it, but I don't. So no, I'm just here. That's where I'm at. Maybe one day.
Yeah, well, for now at least, we've got the Hoover platform to interact with. Maybe people can message you directly here. I think that'll be just fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great. I don't mind anybody contacting me. That'd be absolutely fine.
Or go to DuckDuckGo. I don't know why you should go there, but just go there. Anyways, thank you so much, and I hope you have a good day.
Thanks so much. Pleasure being here. And once again, you guys are doing a fabulous job. Bye for
Thank you.
now.
Bye.